Hello. I tried to convince my cat Stanley to sit in the background for this video. He was not having it. He got a little spooked. Oh. Well, I tried. Notice anything different about me? Notice? I'm wearing a lavalier microphone. And I'm filming in 4K, but I did not get a new camera. I actually just found out that my phone films in 4K, which I did not know. So if you have an iPhone, I don't know at what generation they start doing the cinematic mode, but you can film in 4K in the cinematic mode. You just have to go into the settings and manually turn it on, which I recently learned. So we're in 4K and we've got a lav mic. Now this probably won't be my normal microphone for my sit down videos because I do think the audio quality is still better on my other mic. But as you saw in my Jacob video, we've been starting to do more like bits. We've been starting to have a little bit more fun. And sometimes I'm moving around a little, and there's a few videos coming up specifically that I think the filming is going to be so much easier with mics I can clip to myself and or others. We're just using it today as a test, but never fear for my audiophiles out there. My sit down videos are still gonna be with my nicer mic. This one's it's just a tester, okay? And with that, let's get into the meat and potatoes. Half of the new Bridgerton season just came out. So Netflix is doing something that I think is actually relatively smart. Originally, they used to just drop shows like in their entirety. And part of the sell of streaming was that you could just binge a show. But what they found was that sometimes people would sign up and pay for Netflix only when shows were coming out that they were interested in. Then they would binge the show, then they would cancel Netflix. Sometimes you could do this with a free trial, but other times it's like you'd only pay for a month just to see the one show. So they started releasing episodes weekly to combat that and kind of went away from part of what the whole draw of streaming is, and they were noticing it in their numbers. So we've seen Netflix kind of go back to the binge model, but instead of putting it all out at once, they're kind of putting a half season out and then the other half of the season out a month later. I actually think this is really smart because I think having to pay for 2 months of Netflix, like some people might still do it just to see one show, but I feel like people are less likely to do it in that situation. I know you're like, Meredith, are we really being pro-corporation right now? And the answer is no, but I don't want Netflix to go away, so they do have to figure out a way to be at least remotely profitable. I think the whole like companies have to constantly grow thing is kind of silly, but I'm not mad at a company for trying to be profitable as long as the way that they're doing that isn't like bad for the consumer. And in this situation, I think this is kind of a good middle ground, so I'm curious to see how this ends up going for Netflix's numbers and if this fixes some of the decline that they've seen. That decline could also be because they keep canceling shows after like 1 or 2 seasons. But this is season 3 of Bridgerton, so who knows? Maybe this is the new normal for Netflix. Maybe they're gonna start investing a lot of money into a few shows to make them really good instead of having a giant platform with like a bunch of shit on it. We'll see. Maybe we're heading there. But due to there only being 4 episodes, I was able to consume a bit of wine and watch all 4 episodes last night, a decision I sorely regretted when my alarm went off for my 6:30 a.m. meeting I had this morning, but that's okay. We're hanging in there, and I have thoughts. Let me grab it, hang on. I have read Romancing Mr. Bridgerton, which is Colin and Penelope's book in the Bridgerton series. I've actually read all 8 Bridgertons, but I don't have a video about it because I did that before I had a YouTube channel, just for fun. So I think that tells you a little bit about what you're getting from me in a channel, that's something I would do for fun, you know? Now here's the thing, I don't remember how long ago I read this, nor do I remember what I rated it, but I do remember liking it. Of the 8 Bridgerton books, I remember feeling like the first one was like, eh. The first one is Daphne's, but they start going in alphabetical order after that, so I remember just reading the second one because I was curious as to how it got so big. And a large part of why I didn't like the first one was just because of, you know, some of the horrible things that happen in that book, and just finding it really strange that that would be something that Netflix would like pick up for a TV show series when it has something like that in it. But that made me curious to then read the second book because I was like, I wonder if this kind of thing continues. How much of it does Netflix have to change if there is content like this in it? The answer is that, in my opinion, Anthony's, Benedict's, and Colin's are the most enjoyable of the 8. I liked all 3 of those books. I enjoyed them a lot, and it made me look forward to continue reading this series. From Francesca's onwards, I did not like them nearly as much. Or wait, did I do that right? Colin, Eloise. No, it would be Eloise first and then Francesca's. And from Eloise onwards, I was not really the biggest fan. I mean, they weren't bad. Take Daphne out of it. For Anthony, Benedict, and Colin, they're still historical romances and they're still somewhat cliche, and Benedict's is like a Cinderella retelling, but the characters were also enjoyable and likable, and there was a lot of fun to it. And I love like a turn your brain off historical romance kind of vibe, right? And so I enjoyed those 3 books for that reason. And then moving forward from there, I don't know if she just ran out of ideas, because there's only so many tropes you can do with historical romance if you want to keep it relatively like accurate to the times, or what, but it's like as you kept going, I felt like the plots got weirder, like weirder things started happening. It felt a lot more like that first book with Daphne, not nearly as problematic, but just like strange, you know what I'm saying? So it's been a while since I've read them, but I remember liking this one, and I do want to reread it before the back half of the season comes out, because I'm curious to see how much it lines up. I don't really have time to read it this weekend, so that's why I decided to just post the video about the show. But the other thing that's of note is that I actually think the show is staying a lot truer to this book than Anthony's season stayed true to the Anthony book. I don't typically have an issue with adaptations changing plot. I've talked about that a little bit on the channel. A screen is a different medium to a book, and so fundamentally different things are going to be entertaining. And so I'm not usually one to like nitpick like, oh, that was slightly different in the book, now I'm mad. So it's not that they changed things that bothered me. The thing that bothered me is I felt like they changed the core of who these characters were. Like Anthony in the show did not feel like Anthony in the book, and Kate in the show did not feel like Kate in the book, and Kate's sister in the show certainly did not feel like how Kate was in the book. And so I had a little bit of an issue with it just because I felt like they made all 3 of them so unlikable. And in the book, like, there's similar, like, things happen, but they changed a lot of the plot, and then they changed so much of how the characters, like, behave and interact with each other that it truly felt like it wasn't even based on the source material. Like the only thing that related was like the bee thing, but even that they kind of changed. So it wasn't even that they changed the plot as much as I feel like they changed like the personalities of the characters and they made them so much more unlikable. But even as I say that, I do feel like we need more representations of women in TV shows and movies that suck, but don't suck in the way that women who suck are usually portrayed in TV and movies. A lot of times women that are bad people in TV shows and movies tend to just be caricatures of like the high school mean girl attitude, even if it doesn't take place at a high school and they're not high school age. Whenever women are portrayed as like not super likable, it's usually that personality they go with. So I appreciate the representation of an unlikable woman that wasn't really like a catty high school mean girl, because you know, women can be unlikable in all sorts of ways, and I love the representation, but not in a romance. If I'm supposed to want the characters to be together, I want to like them. And there was a point last season where I was like, I literally don't even want y'all to end up together because I don't like either of you. I think both of you have to show such character growth to end up together, and we only have like 2 episodes left, so how are we gonna do that? And we kind of didn't really, kind of did, I don't know. They ended up resolving it in the end and it was fine. But I also think that might have been a uniquely me opinion because I've spoken to so many women, IRL, who loved last season of Bridgerton who haven't read the book. So maybe it is just that I was thinking about like the personalities of the characters from the books and like how the show like related to the book in that way, because that's the piece of an adaptation that I think really matters, is like both that the characters feel like the same people and that the message of the overall thing is the same. And the message was there, but the characters felt a little different to me. But that's just a subjective opinion. A lot of people really loved last season, so I could be very alone in feeling that way. And that's cool. What about this book and what about this season? I feel like they're sticking a lot truer to the source material in that the characters feel somewhat more similar. No spoilers review first. I'm enjoying it a ton. If you're trying to figure out if it's worth the watch, I definitely think that it is. I'm enjoying it immensely, and I'm specifically really enjoying Penelope as a character. I think she's really fun. I also like, as much as I just talked a little bit of shit about the last season of Bridgerton, I really like that Kate and Anthony are in episodes this season, because I feel like one of the downsides of doing like romance novels and romance TV shows is like the beginning of the book is the characters kind of getting together, so you're missing some of that romance. And I feel like we get that carried through these other characters, Kate and Anthony being some of them, but then there are other characters that are kind of having their romancy moments too, so you're getting some of that even before the couple really figures out that they want to be together. Penelope I'm enjoying immensely. I think she's so fun as a character. Colin, I'm not enjoying him as much as a character, but for the same reasons that I didn't enjoy him in the beginning of the book. Like, I still feel like he's kind of accurate to himself. Great. Because that's like what I was just complaining about, is I feel like it's a much closer portrayal of the book version than Anthony's was. So I definitely think it's worth the watch. If that's all you were looking for, then sign out of this video and click open Netflix, because it is worth the watch, at least for this half of the season. But maybe you've already watched it, or maybe you have no interest in watching it, and so you want a little bit more information. We're getting into the spoilers now. If you don't want it spoiled, go ahead and click off the video. I don't think my roommate is home. I'm gonna close my door just in case my roommate is home, because I don't want to spoil it for her if she can hear me talking. I don't think she is home, but I'm gonna close the door just in case. We're getting into more spoilers now. This is your last chance. If you don't want spoilers, get out of here. Oh, also, I tried so hard to figure out how to screenshot, but Netflix has all this like anti-screenshot software, so I do apologize if I don't have visuals for you guys. We're not very high production around here, okay? We like to just sit and casually chat. I'm not the best video editor on planet Earth. I think you guys have learned that by now. Right away, we start off strong. They do the recap, and then they have a little bit of plot of the episode before the title plays, which is super normal, right? And immediately after the title sequence, we get a shirtless shot of Colin. This show is trying to tell you right away what you're in for. And honestly, I'm here for it. He just changes his shirt in this carriage with his brothers, and they point out how muscular he is now that he's gotten back from his travels. I actually think this is a super accurate representation of how boys treat each other when one of them bulks out. Like, that is definitely something that a man would point out before a woman would. He changes in the carriage with his brothers, and they point out how jacked he is, so that you, the audience, also, of course, notice how jacked he is. We find out that Penelope's family's finances have been worked out, but I don't remember exactly what it is they did, and I'm too lazy to look it up. It really doesn't matter. But that's kind of an undercurrent through the season, so we'll see where that goes, because that hasn't really gone anywhere yet. They're just building tension. This lawyer came by and was like, are we sure this document is real? And there's all this pressure on Penelope's sisters to have an heir so that they can officially transfer the estate to them, because the lawyer basically said, if I find out the document is forged before we transfer the estate, then we would have to go through this whole process of transferring the estate to a different family. But of course, you have to have a man in the family to transfer the estate to, and there currently is not one that is actually a blood descendant. So like the married-in men don't count. You need like a blood descendant. So Penelope has two older sisters that are supposed to be kind of like the evil stepsisters, and they're both married, and a lot of this half season is their mother pressuring both of these girls to have a child so that they can have a son, so that they can transfer the estate to the son, so that they don't get caught out for whatever forging they did to kind of get the estate and the money and all of that. So we find out that Colin is recently back from some travels, and that he seems to be a changed man. He's quite charming now. Not only that, but we remember a big falling out between Eloise and Penelope, where Eloise found out that Penelope was Lady Whistledown, but Lady Whistledown had written some unkind things about Eloise, and this upset Eloise a lot. And Penelope was trying to explain to her that like part of not getting caught is writing things that hurt the people close to her, because if people figured out who usually got spared from Lady Whistledown, then they might be able to kind of figure out who Lady Whistledown is. But it takes a while for them to actually like talk even at all. They just keep sharing these like forlorn looks. These really like extended, just like sad eye contact moments that are slightly strange. Especially funny when you remember both of these actresses are actually in their 30s. So I imagine they had fun filming those scenes, but it was really awkward to watch. Like nobody does that. Nobody just like shares eye contacts like that across a room. Or if they do, I've never experienced it. Comment below, have you ever had extended and forlorn eye contact with an ex-friend of yours across a crowded ballroom? Let me know. Right away, we notice some strange continuity things, and they're especially strange if you know where the book series is going. I don't want to spoil anything for other books or for later in the series, obviously, because like nobody would want to watch the video if I was doing that unless you guys have read all the books. Which very few people probably have, because again, it's a strange choice, and I understand that about myself. But they were setting up already like multiple of the other Bridgerton books in different ways. I was wondering if they were going to start combining different of the siblings' love stories together, because Netflix is just not probably going to fund 8 seasons of a TV show. I thought the season was going to be Eloise and Penelope because of the way the last season left off. It seemed like that's where they were heading. They kind of just threw all that out. Eloise runs off at the end of the last season, but at the beginning of this season, we find out that she's just come back, and they never really like explain in depth what happened. They just said she went to the countryside and they had to go get her. I don't know if they're going to end up bringing that back up later, or if they're just going to like wildly change how Eloise's plot goes down. But I think I'm kind of right in that they're combining some of these siblings' love stories together, because this season seems to be about Colin and Francesca. And so it's about Colin and Penelope, and possibly Francesca and this guy we've recently met in the show. I don't know if that's who they're going with. I don't remember what the name of the hero in her novel was, and I don't actually physically own that one. I borrowed it from the library. So the best that I can think of is that both Eloise and Francesca's love stories in the book series, as well as Benedict's actually, so I'm curious to see where they go with that, take place away from the Ton. So maybe because they wanted to start combining the siblings together, they like noticed that it would be kind of hard to do Eloise's storyline or to do Francesca's storyline and be cutting back and forth to the rest of what's happening in the show. With them all living kind of in the same place, they're able to have multiple plot developments happen in the same scene, almost, where we see something with Francesca and we see something with Colin and Penelope, all at the same ball, right? So it makes it a lot easier for them in filming, because they don't have to have essentially like 2 different locations in show, which would be like significantly more set. So I understand the decision. The thing I think is strange is, why didn't they make that decision when they started producing the show? They very heavily set up Eloise's at the end of last season. Like, I fully thought the season was going to be about Eloise and Colin because of the way the last season ended. And then they just basically threw all of that out the window. And so to me, it's like, why didn't you look ahead? Like, why didn't you see, oh, if we do Eloise's story the way it's written in the book, then we have to have an entirely separate thing going on that's like completely separate from the Ton, and that might be hard to produce for the show, expensive for the sets, hard to make the episodes flow. Let's just not do that, and let's just alter it so that it kind of takes place in the Ton. And I think that's what they're setting up. Francesca's story is wildly different from what I remember from her book. I think they've just like basically thrown out what happened in the book and have gone in a significantly different direction, unless she doesn't end up finding her love in this season and she does get her own season, in which case, maybe, you know what? Let's come back to this. Let me focus on Colin and Penelope, and I'm going to come back to Francesca at the end, and I am going to talk a little bit about what happens in Francesca's book, because I'm trying to figure out exactly what they're doing with the show, and I'm not 100% certain. So let's put Francesca aside for a second and focus on Colin and Penelope, and then we'll come back to her and Eloise, because I have theories. So back to Colin and Penelope. Colin has drastically changed personality-wise from last season to this season. He's a lot more charming. He seems to be more of like a ladies' man. We see him walking around the Ton and like flirting with women, but then he's like adamant to his mother that he doesn't want to go on the marriage mart, if you will. He's not looking for a wife yet. And everybody's like, dude, this doesn't make any sense. What are you doing? And he's like, I just want to flirt around. So he feels very different to how Colin has felt in the past, and Penelope notices this too. You'll remember that near the end of last season, Penelope overheard Colin pronouncing to a large group of men that he would never court Penelope. Colin has no idea that Penelope overheard this. He also has no idea what happened between Penelope and Eloise. So he's very confused by the fact that they're not friends anymore. He's also very confused by the fact that Penelope is being really cold towards him. And eventually she tells him at a ball, when he's trying to like comfort her because Cressida is really mean to her, that she overheard him say that, and she calls him cruel. Also, Eloise and Cressida are like friends now, and they're trying to make us sympathetic to Cressida. And at first I was annoyed by it, but it got to me. And I am a little bit sympathetic to her now. They're basically showing how like horrible her family is to her, and how her mom kind of like raised her to be the way that she is, and she's like trying to change, and so we see her make slightly different decisions. I'm cool with this because basically what happens is that Colin befriends Penelope again. He convinces her to forgive him, and then he promises to help her find a husband. Colin clues Eloise in on this, and Eloise is telling Cressida about it at one point, and then it kind of gets all over town as gossip, and this seems to be the final nail in the coffin of what ruins Penelope. And Penelope basically gives up all hope that she's going to be able to find a husband because of how embarrassing this whole thing is. And Eloise goes to Cressida and is like, what the heck? And Cressida is basically like, dude, I didn't tell anyone. In fact, we see that. We know for a fact as the fans that Cressida did not tell anyone what Eloise had told her, but Eloise told her it so loudly and in public that somebody else had overheard them. And so Cressida gets to kind of turn it around on Eloise and show Eloise how like she was the mean girl in this situation instead of Cressida. And I kind of like that because the whole series up to this point, Cressida has just been this like caricature of a mean girl, exactly what I was talking about earlier, where like she's just mean and that's all there is to her. And I like that they're giving her a little bit more depth. I don't know that I like her yet because she doesn't seem to have fully changed. Like she still has that like mean girl side of her, especially when it comes to competing for some of the men on the Ton, but she's got an extra layer to her that makes her a lot more fun as a character, and it gives us this ability to kind of balance the new Eloise with her now that Eloise and Penelope aren't friends, and Eloise seems to be getting closer to her and behaving more like Cressida as a result. Very fun. So when the secret gets out that Colin was helping Penelope like learn how to flirt so that she could get a suitor, Colin shows up at her house to apologize and like bribes the maid to like leave them alone a moment, and Penelope asks Colin to kiss her because she doesn't want to die having never been kissed. I don't remember if this happens in the book or not. Part of me feels like it does, because what happens after that definitely happens in the book, which is that Colin ends up really, like, all of a sudden realizing that Penelope is like a woman. There is just like a switch that is flipped in him in this kiss, and he is all of a sudden like pining after her and having dreams about her and like wants her to be his wife in a way that he's never even thought about before. Now, on one hand, I love it when a guy is pining for a girl in romance. It's one of my favorite things to read and watch. But I also, it low-key irritated me because it was like such a switch flip of like, they kiss and now he's like, oh my god, I should have realized how much you matter to me and how beautiful you are and like all these things. And it just feels so like, I don't know. If she were one of my girlfriends, I probably would be like, well, he should have realized that a long time ago. I don't know how anyone could see you and not realize that you're so beautiful and that you deserve the world. And if he did not realize that, then that's him being an idiot. That's what I would say to Penelope if she were my girlfriend, but I don't know that I'm right for that because ultimately Colin does care about her a lot. And whatever it was that made him realize that he wants her to be his wife, fine, whatever. There's a wrench in this, in that at this point, Penelope has actually found a man who is interested in her. What is his name? I know Lord Debling. Lord Debling is interested in Penelope, but Cressida is interested in him, and so her and Penelope enter this weird, like, competition for Lord Debling, and they both kind of, like, approach him at the same time sometimes and try to talk to him at the same time. But Penelope gets to the point where this man is about to propose to her and has even asked her mom for permission to propose to her. But Colin asks Penelope to dance, kind of cuts in while she's dancing with Lord Debling because he knows that Lord Debling is about to propose. Colin was trying to convince Penelope that Lord Debling wasn't good for her because he likes to go on these nature expeditions. And at the time, traveling was really difficult, so it takes a long time to get certain places. So he was sometimes going to leave and be away for like 3 years or whatever. Which Penelope kind of likes because she wants to continue doing the Lady Whistledown stuff, so it will help her if she has a husband who's not watching her that closely. But at the same time, there's not a lot of love there, and she's kind of holding out for love. It's a very practical match, if that makes sense. So anyway, all of that to say that he basically says that because he is going to be gone for so much of their marriage, it's really important that he marry somebody who does not have feelings elsewhere. He's worried that Penelope's going to cheat on him. He's going to be gone for 3 years. Maybe Penelope and Colin end up sleeping together while he's gone. Now he doesn't know if his heir is actually his heir. All of that. So he essentially decides not to propose to Penelope because he kind of realizes that she has feelings for Colin and that he maybe has feelings for her. And she's obviously really upset about this because she thought this was like her last chance to get married. So she gets into a carriage and she's crying, but Colin chases down the carriage and he's like, wait. And he gets in, and that's when he confesses his feelings for her, and they make out a little, and he like reaches up her skirt a little, and then they reach the house, and Colin is like, are you gonna marry me or not? And Penelope's like, of course. And this is all great, except that we, the viewer, know that Penelope is Lady Whistledown and that Colin hates Lady Whistledown. And we also know that Eloise knows this. So presumably, Eloise is going to find out that Colin wants to marry Penelope, and Eloise is going to clue Colin in on the fact that Penelope is Lady Whistledown, and things will devolve from there. Thoughts up to now, like I said, the characters seem a lot more similar to the characters in the book than they did last season, just personality-wise. I am struggling a little bit with Colin just because, like I said, I feel like I'm just like the friend of of Penelope in me is just like irritated that he had to kiss her to realize she was pretty and all that, but whatever. It's a romance novel. The other big thing of note is that do the sex scenes feel weird to you guys in this season? They feel, I don't know, I'm almost tempted to go back and like specifically seek out a sex scene from one of the first 2 seasons, because I know like they're always kind of over the top in these kinds of shows, but it feels like the acting in the sex scenes is like so over the top now. Like before, one could make the argument you were watching a TV show. Now when the sex scenes come on, it really does feel like, you know, just because of like the overacting, like it just, like it actually feels like, you know, it did not feel that way to me in the first 2 seasons. It's like, yes, they're pretty naked. Yes, we're seeing a lot of stuff, but it still felt like relatively realistic. I don't know. Maybe I'm totally off base. And if I go back and rewatch a sex scene from one of the first 2 seasons, I'll feel the same way. But it just felt like, even with Kate and Anthony, who we watched all last season, I mean, not all last season, but by the time they get together last season, they end up, you know, doing the dirty. And we see that. And I don't remember feeling at the time like it was really overacted, but then there are some sex scenes between the 2 of them, especially at the beginning of this series, that do feel like very overacted. That just made it feel like porn. You know what I mean? You picking up what I'm putting down? Because we know that's overacted, right? So I'm seeing the correlation there where I didn't before. But hey, sometimes a show knows what it is, and that's cool. I don't necessarily dislike that. I'm just pointing it out. There's not a lot to analyze here beyond that, except for like the stuff that I find more interesting about this season from an analysis perspective of the show as a whole and comparing it to the books is what's happening with both Francesca and Eloise because of how different stuff is. And it's hard for me to talk about that without talking about some specifics. So I'm not going to spoil the plots for Eloise and Francesca, but I am going to talk about the premises of their books, because I think that's important to understand. And if you're just watching the show, that might kind of be a spoiler because it might hint at how they're going to align the show. So I just wanted to warn you that I'm going to tell you what the premises of those 2 books are so that I can talk about how I thought the show was setting them up. And now the show has like this weird continuity thing where it almost feels like they wanted to undo some of the decisions they made at the end of last season to change the plot of those seasons, and why I think that is. So just wanted to give you that heads up. But I'm not going to be like spoiling like the plot of those. So it's just if you don't want to know like the premises of those books. Now is your time to sign out. The premise of Eloise's book is that she's been writing letters to this guy. I forget how they ended up being pen pals, but they're kind of pen pals and they've been explaining letters. And this man is a widow and he has multiple children and he's kind of struggling with the children. And Eloise is really struggling with the ton and the marriage mart and all of that. And so Eloise essentially runs off to meet this guy without even warning him that she's coming, I'm pretty sure, or the letter warning him and her like arrive around the same time. And she doesn't have like a chaperone, so this is very scandalous, and her family doesn't really know where she went. And she just shows up and she's like, hey, I'm here now. I always felt like it was going to be kind of hard for the show to do her season entirely how it was, because she ends up like really finding that she enjoys being the mother to his children, which is very unlike the Eloise we've met in the show. Not saying that she couldn't discover that she enjoys being a mother, but I think a lot more people would be mad. Like, the book portrayal of Eloise is not nearly as I don't want to be a homemaker as the show version of Eloise, and so I think if they went that direction, people would be pretty mad. But that's kind of the setup of that book, is Eloise just kind of shows up and agrees to help him with his children, and then they bond as she's helping him with his children. But the other thing that's interesting is that the name of that guy is Sir Philip. Now, if you remember, Sir Philip married the girl that Colin was like messing around with in the first season. And Eloise was sending letters to a guy named Sir Philip all last season, or I don't know if they ever gave us his name, but we knew she was sending letters to somebody. And then she runs off at the end of the season. So that's why I thought that the next season was going to start with Eloise. But the reason I brought up that the other girl married him is because they also hinted at her not being in the most stable place emotionally. And canonically, part of the setup of that book, and this is what I told you guys I was going to tell you, and that's why I was saying it might kind of be a spoiler for the show. Canonically, the reason he is a widow is because his wife kills herself. And that's kind of an important part of their plot as well. Again, that's just premise for the book, but that's why I'm saying that might be kind of a spoiler for the show. So that's why I wanted to kind of give you guys that heads up. They set all of that up over the course of the first 2 seasons. So that's why I'm saying it's so weird to me that they end up just seemingly deciding not to do that now going into this season, because they made so many calculated decisions over the course of the first 2 seasons to set Eloise's book up. So they planted the girl that ended up marrying him. They planted that she's not doing the best mentally, right? That she's kind of struggling, that she wasn't super happy with the marriage, that she wanted to be with Colin, but she got kind of ruined. She was already pregnant. Eloise sending the letters and Eloise running off. Like, they did all of this to set up what is essentially the premise of Eloise's actual book, only to then literally throw all that out the window and try to brush it away by just being like, oh yeah, Eloise was in the countryside for a bit, but now she's back and everything's great. And it's just really strange. I just think the whole thing is really, really strange. I don't understand why they made those choices leading into it. Like, again, I fundamentally understand, like, why it would make it so much more expensive for them to film the show that way, because they got to build a whole bunch of different sets. Like I said, if they can do everything, like, with the same ball, with the same scene, the same background actors, they can film it all kind of around the same time, it makes it way cheaper. So I completely understand why they want all of their plot lines to kind of center around England and the Ton, but like, why didn't they make that decision when they started making the show? Because now you've set all this stuff up. So I'm very curious to see like what they keep from Eloise's storyline, because part of what's really important with that is that she like stays with Philip for a while, and it's like super improper, and that when her family shows up, they're basically like, you have to marry her because this is insane. She's been living with you for like months now and we didn't know where she was. So, or I'm trying to remember, maybe she was only there like a week before they found out where she was, and then it was just like kind of a forced marriage at that point. Like, they were already married. I don't know. But I do know that like basically her family shows up and is like, hey, you guys have to get married. You've been living together, just the 2 of you, no chaperone. You guys have to get married. Thus is the times. So that's strange. Maybe they decided they didn't want to kill off that other girl. I don't know. And so they're just going to give Eloise like a completely different love interest and do something completely different. But it just kind of irritates me that they set it up so perfectly. And I think people would have been like, whoa, when the new season aired, to like see all of those ties connected together and how far back they were thinking about it to set all that up, only to have it turn out this way. It's a little bit strange. The other thing is Francesca. Again, I'm just going to be talking about the premise of Francesca's book, and this may turn out to be a spoiler, or it may turn out to be completely unrelated to how the show is going. But again, I just wanted to give you the warning. It really depends on what they do with the show, whether or not this is going to end up being a major spoiler, because I have 2 different theories. So the plot of Francesca's book is that she was married and her husband dies, and now she's a widow. And I believe her romance is with his brother. So it's like the brother of her dead husband that she ends up having the romance with. And what I do remember is that the original marriage that she was in was very comfortable, and that the man was very kind, but it wasn't nearly as passionate as the love she ends up having with his brother after he passes away tragically. So the reason I'm saying that might be a spoiler is because what I don't know is if this season with Francesca, they are just throwing all of that out the window and essentially just having her like on the marriage mart, whatever, and they're just gonna have her have a romance with somebody and then be like, cool, we did Francesca, whatever, and move on. Or part of what they keep talking about is that Francesca isn't really looking for a love match. She does sort of want to do the practical thing. So right now she's picking between a Marquess and an Earl. Up to this point in the season, I mean. And an Earl is below a Marquess. I did have to look that up. I am not super familiar with the royal hierarchy, okay? I'm a rootin' tootin' American, so I did not know that. I had to Google it. But anyway, she's trying to choose between this Marquess and this, I think I'm saying that right, whatever, it doesn't matter, and this Earl. And in theory, the better match is the Marquess, especially because the queen chose that for her, so she'd kind of be going against what the queen wants if she ends up with the earl, which, I mean, I don't think that would end up, like, turning out that poorly for her in the long run, but it would just, like, piss off the queen, which I think is not typically something that British nobles like to do. So what I don't know, like I said, is if they're just kind of throwing all of that out the window and they wrote Francesca a love story and we're just gonna watch the love story play out and she's gonna end up with the guy that she seems to like better of these two men. The other thing they could be doing, and that's why I'm saying this could be a major spoiler, is that she could decide at the end of this season to kind of settle on the love front and end up with the really stable match in the Marquess. Again, I have no idea if I'm saying that right. It shows you exactly how much research I do some of these reviews, okay? But I'm the everyday consumer, okay? Why do I have to be an expert on British royalty and nobles and the hierarchy to judge whether or not the show is any good? But all we know is that he's higher ranking than the Earl. That's all that matters. The point is that that match, like, makes more sense, if you will, on paper. And so the other thing they could be setting up is that she could end up marrying this guy, and maybe she will get her own season, in which case that guy will have died and her romance will be with his brother. I don't know. I would assume that they're also, like, that also takes place more in the country. I would assume that they'll do the same thing they've kind of done to Eloise, where they'll pull it back into the Ton in England just to make the filming cheaper and easier, which again I have no issue with. I also have no issue with them changing details, like I said, as long as the characters feel similar, but man, it just disappoints me so much that they put all that work into setting up Eloise's plot, and I guess I don't know if it'll all play out in the end. Maybe they'll find a way to make it all relevant, but I just, like, through watching all of this, I was really appreciating the Easter eggs. Like, I thought it was cool that they were setting that up, and I was very, very disappointed to find them just kind of, like, nixing that, it seems, at this point in the season. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, obviously, these are just kind of, like, loose predictions. We have no idea where the show is going. I feel like whatever we see from the end of this season from Francesca will let us know, like, whichever man she ends up with will let us know, like, is this just her love story, or does her story end up different? But they signed her on as a series regular, so maybe they are gonna kill that man. Poor guy. I don't remember what he dies from, but I just remember it being unexpected and tragic, so RIP. RIP in advance. So anyway, I don't know, we'll see. But those are my thoughts on the season up to now. I'm gonna try and read this before the next season comes out. I'm also out of town when the next season comes out, so I'm gonna try and download it so that I can watch it on my travels. But no matter what, the update in my review of it won't come out as swiftly after the show airs as this one did, because I will be actively on vacation when the show airs, and I'm not about to be like, everybody pause, I have to spend a day of this vacation making a video for youtube.com because a new Bridgerton season came out. So forgive me for that one. But as always, I want to hear what you guys think. Have you watched the show yet? What do you think? Have you read the books? Do you agree with my theories? How are we all feeling? All in all, loving it. I'm enjoying it a ton. I'm really excited for the new season of the show to come out. I feel like it's significantly better than last season, and I'm just really looking forward to seeing how the season plays out. I love you guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!